3 hours before the most important board vote of the year, I was standing in my mother's kitchen in Phoenix, Arizona, pretending I didn't know what a balance sheet was. My sister Brooke was at the head of the table in a cream blazer, accepting congratulations for her new CEO title at a regional consulting firm. My mother was refilling champagne flutes. My uncle Grant was giving a toast about ambition and hard work and the bloodline of achievers this family had always been. And me? I was sitting at the corner of the table in a plain cardigan, nodding along. They had no idea. No idea that 48 hours earlier, I had signed off on the final acquisition that made Callaway Capital Group the controlling shareholder of a publicly traded infrastructure company valued at $2.8 billion. No idea that my name, my full name, Nora Callaway, was on the founding documents of a private equity firm that had appeared 3 times in the Wall Street Journal that year. No idea that the reason I'd been unavailable at Thanksgiving was because I was in Singapore closing a fund round that would make their family home look like a line item. They thought I was a bookkeeper, not a CPA, not a financial analyst, a bookkeeper. Because 9 years ago, when I left Phoenix for New York with a duffel bag and a second round acceptance to Columbia Business School, my mother had told her friends I was going to study accounting. And I never corrected her, I should have. I know that now. But at the time, I was 24. I was scared. And I'd spent my entire childhood watching my family make decisions about who mattered based on what they could see. A degree they'd heard of, a salary they could quote at dinner, a title they could repeat at church. So I made a decision. I would build quietly. I would build until the thing I was building was so large they couldn't pretend it wasn't there. That morning was supposed to be the moment I showed them. Instead, what happened in that kitchen, the words they said, what they tried to do, turned the moment into something else entirely. Something they will never forget. Before I tell you what happened, I need you to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. And if this story already has your attention, drop a comment below. I want to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. Now, let me take you back to the beginning, because this story doesn't start at that Christmas Eve dinner. It starts in Phoenix 9 years ago, in a house on West Mulberry Drive, where I was told very clearly that I had no future. My father, Howard Calloway, died when I was 16, heart attack. He was 51 years old, and he hadn't slept more than 6 hours a night in 20 years because he was running a small commercial real estate brokerage that could never quite outrun its own debt. He was brilliant, obsessive, and completely unrecognized by the people around him. My mother, Diane, was a real estate agent who had spent 15 years operating in his shadow, convinced she was the more practical one. When he died, his brokerage died with him. The debt stayed. Brooke was 20 at the time, already enrolled at Arizona State, already the daughter my mother leaned on, confided in, pointed to when relatives asked how the family was doing. Brooke had the kind of competence that photographs well. Organized binders, color-coded planners, the ability to speak with authority about things she'd read once. I was the one who actually understood what my father had been building. Not because I was smarter, because I was the one he talked to. Every Sunday morning, while Brooke slept in and my mother drank her coffee and watched the news, my father and I would sit at the kitchen table with his legal pads and go through the numbers. Not the numbers his brokerage showed clients, the real numbers, the capital structure of the deals he was trying to put together, the equity he was trying to protect. He'd say, "Nora, the money is never in the building. The money is in who controls the building." He'd tap the legal pad. Control, that's the whole game. He died before he could prove it. I enrolled at Phoenix Community College 2 weeks after his funeral because we needed the Pell Grant money. I work part-time at a title company in Tempe, processing documents for commercial closings. For 2 years, I watched deals move through that office. Small ones, messy ones, deals that fell apart over things that shouldn't have mattered. And I started to understand what my father had meant. I applied to Columbia Business School on a Tuesday in November. I told no one. I received my acceptance in April. I told no one. I left Phoenix on a Sunday morning in late August with a bag, a laptop, and a cashier's check for my first semester's tuition from a merit scholarship I'd applied for in secret. I left a note on the kitchen counter that said I'd call when I landed. My mother called me 4 hours later. "You could have applied to ASU," she said. "You didn't have to go to New York." I could hear Brooke in the background. She's always been dramatic. I was on the I-10 headed for the airport. I didn't cry. He said, "I'll call you when I land, Mom." I landed. I called. Hint, for the next 9 years, I called every Sunday, answered every question about how things were going with a version of the truth that my family was comfortable receiving. And I built. Columbia was where I met Jasper Okafor. Jasper was from Atlanta. He was 27, already had 2 years at a mid-market private equity firm behind him, and he had the kind of financial mind that made professors slow down mid-lecture. We were partnered on a case study in our second semester, a distressed commercial real estate portfolio in Chicago, and we worked in the library until 2 in the morning 4 nights in a row. On the fifth night, we had the same idea at the same moment, looked at each other across the table, and Jasper said, "What if we just did this for real?" We graduated. We spent 3 years working at separate firms. Me at a structured finance desk in Midtown, Jasper at a growth equity fund in the Flatiron District. We saved, we networked. We identified a gap in mid-market infrastructure, assets that were undervalued not because they were poor investments, but because nobody with enough capital had looked at them carefully enough. In year 4, we formed Callaway Capital Group. Callaway, because my father had told me that control was the whole game, and because his name deserved to be on something that lasted. The first 3 years were brutal. We closed 2 deals and nearly lost both. We ate into our personal reserves. We worked out of a co-working space in the Flatiron District with 6 other people, 3 of whom thought we were going to fail. We took calls at midnight. We flew coach, but by year 5, we had returned 22% on our first fund. After that, the calls came to us. By the time I flew back to Phoenix that December, Callaway Capital Group had $2.8 billion in assets under management. We had offices in New York, Chicago, and Austin. We employed 61 people. I was 33 years old, and I had quietly become one of the youngest women to build a fund of that scale in private equity, a fact that had appeared in 3 business publications my family had never read, and 1 podcast they had never heard. My mother still thought I was a bookkeeper. I had let it go on so long that correcting it felt impossible. Every time I tried, every time I opened my mouth to explain what I actually did, there was a look Diane Callaway gave me, a look that said, "Don't make this complicated, Nora. Don't make everything about you." And I would close my mouth and talk about something else. But that Christmas, something changed. The invitation came via text from my mother on November 18th. Christmas Eve dinner at the house. Brooke has big news. We want the whole family together. Can you come? I could, I shouldn't have. But I had been in New York for 11 months without going home, and there was something in me that still needed to see them, needed to believe that 9 years of building something extraordinary would eventually translate into something that felt like being known. I booked a flight to Phoenix Sky Harbor for December 23rd. I didn't tell them what I did. I didn't tell them what I was worth. I didn't warn them. But I did call Jasper before I left. "You sure about this?" he said. He knew my family the way you know someone else's weather. From description, never from standing in it. "No," I said. "But I need to see what's there." Jasper paused. "Take your laptop, just in case." I took my laptop. I landed in Phoenix on a Wednesday evening. December air in Phoenix is cool and dry, the mountains turning purple at dusk over the Ahwatukee foothills. I rented a car, a plain sedan, not the town car I used in New York, and drove to the Holiday Inn on South 24th Street. I had booked a hotel. I always booked a hotel when I came home. Staying in the house made it harder to leave. I texted my mother. "Landed. I'll see you tomorrow." She replied, "Brooke is so excited. It's going to be a wonderful night." I put my phone face down on the nightstand and opened my laptop. There were 42 emails. I worked until midnight. Then I slept. Christmas Eve. The house on West Mulberry Drive looked exactly as it always had. Red brick, palm trees in the front yard. The same wind chime my mother had hung on the porch in 1999. I pulled up at 5:30 with a bottle of wine and a box of chocolate from a shop on Camelback Road. My Uncle Grant's truck was already in the driveway. So was my Aunt Renata's SUV. My cousin Tyson's car, a newer model I noticed, was parked on the street. I stood outside for a moment before I knocked. The desert evening was quiet. Somewhere down the block, a kid was riding a bicycle. I knocked. My mother opened the door in her holiday apron, and her expression when she saw me was the expression she always had, a complicated mixture of love and mild disappointment. Like she'd hoped for something slightly different and was making the best of what arrived. Nora, you made it. She hugged me. You look tired. Good to see you too, Mom. The living room was full of family. Grant and Renata on the couch, Tyson near the fireplace with his girlfriend Kelsey, a few neighbors I recognized from years back, and Brooke, standing at the edge of the dining room in her cream blazer, holding a glass of champagne like a trophy she'd already been awarded. She saw me and smiled. The smile you give someone you feel sorry for. Nora. She crossed the room and hugged me. You look exactly the same. She didn't mean it as a compliment. I said, so do you. Congratulations on the new role. Oh, you heard? She tipped her head. Mom told you? Mom mentioned you had news. It's a big deal, she said. Not immodestly, yeah, just as a fact. CEO of Harmon and Breeze Consulting, Southwest Region. We're responsible for about $40 million in revenue. She let that number land. It's a lot of responsibility, but I've always worked best under pressure. I said, that's really impressive, Brooke. She studied me for a moment like she was checking whether I meant it. Then, what about you? Still doing the bookkeeping thing? Still working in finance? I said. She nodded. That's good, stable. And then she moved away, back toward the people who mattered to her at this dinner. I went to find a place to set down the wine. The meal was Diane Calloway's full Christmas production. A glazed ham, roasted potatoes, the green bean casserole she'd made every year since I was a child. The table was beautiful. Her good china, the silver candlesticks. She was a good host. She always had been. Whatever else was true about my mother, she knew how to set a table. The toast was started before the main course. Grant went first. A long one, the kind that starts as a tribute to the family and gradually becomes a tribute to the speaker. He talked about hard work. He talked about legacy. He looked at Brooke twice while he spoke. He looked at me once, briefly, the way you glance at furniture. To Brooke, he finished, the Callaways have always been built for big things. You're proof of that. Glasses went up. I raised mine. Then my mother stood. I want to say something, she said. Her voice had the emotional undertone she used at important moments, slightly thickened, slightly rehearsed. I am so proud of this family, of what Brooke has accomplished. Your father would have been so proud, sweetheart. She was looking at Brooke. He always knew you were the one who would do something extraordinary. There it was. He always knew you were the one. I looked down at my plate. Tyson, who had always been the loud one, the one who said the things others were thinking, leaned across the table toward me. What about you, Nora? Anything new happening in the world of accounting? A few people chuckled. Not meanly, just the way people laugh at a familiar joke. I don't do accounting, I said. Finance, right? Sorry. He waved a hand. Same thing. It's not really the same thing. I said, sure. He picked up his fork. What do you actually do? I looked at him, at the table, at my mother, who was watching me with that look. Don't make this complicated. And at Brooke, who wore a small, patient expression that said she was willing to wait as long as it took for me to say something modest. I work in investment management, I said, private equity. Brooke tilted her head. Private equity is pretty specialized. What size fund? A question she already thought she knew the answer to. Mid to large, I said. What does that mean exactly? Tyson asked. It means the assets under management are in the billions. A small silence. Renata. Billions? Yes, Grant set his fork down. You personally manage billions of dollars? I co-founded the firm, I said. My business partner and I built it together. The room had changed. I could feel it. Not celebration. Something more careful, the kind of stillness that comes when people are recalibrating, not quite willing to believe something and not quite able to dismiss it. Brooke recovered first. Nora, come on. Her voice was warm and lightly amused, the voice of the older sister patiently correcting. You don't have to inflate it. We're family. I'm not inflating it. Private equity at that scale. You're talking about firms like Blackstone, KKR. You don't just build those. She picked up her champagne. What's the firm called? Callaway Capital Group. Another silence. I watched Tyson pull out his phone under the table. I didn't stop him. 30 seconds passed. Tyson's expression shifted. He looked at me, then at his phone, then at me again. Nora, he said slowly, there's a Callaway Capital Group with offices in New York, Chicago, and Austin. He read, founded in 2019 by Jasper Okafor and Nora Callaway. Assets under management, 2.8 billion as of... He stopped reading. He looked at me. My mother. That's your name. Yeah, and that's your firm? Yes. Yeah. Brooke put her champagne glass down on the table. It made a sound that was too loud for the silence in the room. You've had a private equity firm for 4 years, she said, and you never told us. I never told you. I agreed. Why? I thought about the Sunday morning phone calls, the look my mother gave me at holiday dinners when I tried to explain what I was working on, the year she told a neighbor I was in accounting, and I'd let it stand because correcting it felt harder than living with it. Because I said carefully, every time I started to tell you what I was building, someone changed the subject. My mother. That's not fair. Mom, I looked at her. The last 3 times I called on Sundays, you told me about Brooke's firm within the first 5 minutes. You told me her revenue targets. You told me her team size. I was sitting in a board meeting in Chicago when I took one of those calls. And I didn't say that because I didn't want to make it competitive. You should have said something. I tried. You weren't listening for it. The dinner fell apart the way things fall apart in families. Not in one explosion, but in a series of smaller collapses, each one clearing the ground for the next. Grant took a position. I had deceived the family by withholding this, and that said something about my character. Renata agreed more gently that it was strange to keep something so significant secret. Tyson went quiet, scrolling through search results on his phone, reading things I couldn't see from across the table. Brooke said very little. That was the thing about Brooke. She went quiet when she was calculating. It was my mother who I watched most carefully, because her face did something I hadn't expected. It went through grief before it went through anything else. Not anger, not pride. Grief. Like she was mourning a version of me she'd invented, a version that was smaller and easier to explain, and now had to be put down. I wish you had told me, she said finally across the table. Her voice was different now, stripped of the holiday warmth. Raw underneath. All these years, and I thought you were. A bookkeeper, I said. I didn't know what you were. I know. We looked at each other. I'm proud of you, she said. And then quieter. I wish I'd known to be. That sentence cost her something. I could see it. And it cost me something to hear it, because it was the closest she had ever come to saying what I had needed her to say for 9 years. But then Brooke spoke. She had been quiet long enough. I want to ask you something, Brooke said. She'd moved from her seat and was now leaning against the kitchen doorframe, arms folded. CEO posture? The fund, the 2.8 billion. Does that mean you personally have... I'm not going to discuss the financials of the firm at the dinner table. Ballpark? No, she studied me. Because if what you're saying is true, and if Callaway Capital is as successful as that article Tyson found suggests, then you've been sitting in this house for years, letting Mom worry about you, letting us think you needed. She stopped. She was choosing words. You let Mom send you money, she said. The room went completely still. My mother, Brooke. 3 years ago, Mom wired Nora $800 for rent. Brooke looked at our mother, then at me, because Nora said she was between clients and it was a tight month. Mom was worried. She took it out of her savings. I paid it back. I said. 2 months later, I paid it back. Why did you take it in the first place? And here is where I should tell you what was true. 3 years ago, in the February of Callaway Capital's worst quarter, a quarter where our largest LP had asked for an early return of capital, and we'd spent 6 weeks restructuring 2 positions simultaneously, I had been, genuinely, short on personal liquidity. Not broke, not desperate, but I had invested heavily into the firm at a critical moment. And in that particular month, my personal account was thinner than I would ever want my mother to know. She had called on a Sunday and heard something in my voice. She had offered. I had, briefly, accepted. I had paid it back in 60 days. But standing in her kitchen, I understood what Brooke was doing with that fact. She was turning it into a weapon. She was using the one moment in 9 years where I had accepted help. One moment, $800, to rewrite the entire story. You took $800 from our mother, Brooke said, while managing a multi-billion-dollar fund. Do you understand how that looks? I understand what you're doing, I said. I'm asking a question. You're auditing me in front of the family. You've been sitting there for 20 minutes deciding how to make this about something I did wrong. I looked at her steadily. Because if I've done something extraordinary and you didn't know about it, the easier story for you is that I've done something wrong. Brooke's jaw tightened. That's not... You called me dramatic, Brooke. The morning I left for New York, you said I was being dramatic. I could hear you in the background. I set my napkin on the table. I've heard your voice in the background every time I tried to tell this family who I actually was. Not because you were cruel, because you genuinely believed I wasn't capable of anything that would challenge your version of this family's story. She said nothing. The $800, I continued. I should not have taken it. That's the one thing in this entire conversation I actually regret. And I paid it back. But you don't get to use the smallest moment in 9 years to erase everything else. I left the table after that. Not dramatically. I didn't want dramatic. I walked to the kitchen, set my plate in the sink, and took my phone out of my pocket. I had a message from Jasper. Board vote in 48 hours. Mitchell Group is going to try to push through the secondary offering before we can block it. You need to be ready. I stood at my mother's kitchen window, looking out at the desert backyard, the saguaro she'd planted when I was 12, the string lights along the fence that she put up every Christmas, and I typed back, I know I'll be ready. Then I called Stephen Karp. Stephen was Callaway Capital's general counsel, a 58-year-old former federal prosecutor from Washington, D.C., who had the demeanor of someone who had seen everything and been surprised by none of it. I had hired him in year 2 for his precision and kept him for his loyalty. Stephen, I said quietly, Mitchell Group. What do we have? More than enough, he said. Their secondary offering requires board approval. We hold 34% of the board's voting interest through our syndicate position. We can block it, but we need to file the response notice before 9 a.m. Friday. Get the filing ready. I'll sign off tonight. You're in. Phoenix, I have a laptop. A pause. Nora, this filing, if we execute this correctly, is going to make the front page of the financial press by Monday. Mitchell Group has been positioning themselves publicly as the rightful stewards of this asset. When we block the offering and submit the counterproposal, which gives the pension fund LPs a better exit, it's going to become a very public demonstration of what Callaway Capital is. I looked through the kitchen window. My mother was standing at the dining room table, talking quietly to Grant. Brooke was on the other side of the room with her back to me. That's fine, I said. Send me the filing. Are you sure? Stephen, send me the filing. I went back to the dining room 20 minutes later. The temperature had settled. Grant and Renata were saying their goodbyes. Tyson was in the corner with Kelsey, speaking quietly. My mother was in the kitchen. Brooke was sitting at the clear dinner table alone, a glass of water in front of her, phone face down. She looked up when I came in. I owe you an apology, she said. I sat down across from her. I've spent a long time, she continued, being the successful one. In this family, that was my identity. It was what Mom held on to after Dad died. She looked at the table. I think I needed you to be smaller than me, not because I wanted bad things for you, just because if you were the same or better. She stopped. It would change what I was. I looked at my sister. The cream blazer, the precise posture, the lines around her eyes that hadn't been there the last time I'd seen her 3 Christmases ago. Brooke, I said, what you've built is real. 40 million in revenue is not nothing. A CEO title is not nothing. I'm not trying to erase what you've done. But I needed you to see me. Both of you and Mom. And instead of demanding to be seen, I just disappeared into being invisible. And that's on me, too. I folded my hands on the table. We both made choices that got us here. She was quiet for a moment. The $800, she said. I shouldn't have taken it. I've said that. No, I mean, she exhaled. I'm sorry I used it that way. That was small of me. She met my eyes. I was scared. You have to understand that. I've been the successful daughter my entire adult life, and you walked into this house tonight and everything reorganized itself. I didn't know how to handle that. You don't have to handle it. It doesn't change anything about you. It changes everything about the story I've been telling myself. She wasn't wrong about that, and I didn't have a clean answer for it. Because the story we tell ourselves about our families, about our place in them, is one of the things we protect most fiercely, sometimes at the cost of the truth. My mother came in from the kitchen. She looked at the two of us at the table and sat down. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Outside, the desert wind moved through the saguaro in the backyard, the way it always did, the way it had every Christmas Eve of my entire childhood. Your father, she said finally, talked about you the way he never talked about anything else. I looked at her. He said you understood the way he thought? That you were the only one who did. She pressed her lips together. I think I was jealous of that, even after he was gone. That you had something with him? I didn't. She shook her head. And then you left, and I had Brooke, and I told myself it was simpler, and I made it simpler, and I let years go by. Mom. Let me finish. Her voice was thin. I should have asked better questions. I should have listened more carefully. I should have known my own daughter. She looked at me across the table. Callaway Capital? He would have been so proud, Nora. The name alone. She touched the tablecloth. You named it for him. Yes. She nodded slowly. We sat there, the three of us, at the same table where we'd sat when my father was alive, and this had been a different family, a more complete one. And the silence wasn't empty. It was full of all the years we hadn't said the right things to each other. At 10 o'clock, I drove back to the Holiday Inn. I called Jasper. How bad was it? He asked. It was honest, I said, which is different from bad. Are you okay? I pulled into the parking lot and sat in the car with the engine off. The Phoenix sky above the freeway was dark orange at the edges from the city light, a color you only see in the desert. I think so, I said. Send me the Mitchell Group filing, already in your inbox. Good. Nora, a pause. You know the financial press is going to pick this up, right? After we file Friday, your name is going to be in places your family can actually see. I know. You've been invisible for 9 years on purpose. I know. I looked up at the desert sky. I think I'm done with that. Friday, 8:47 a.m., Mountain Standard Time. I was sitting at the desk in my hotel room with my laptop, the filing open on the screen, Stephen Karp on the phone, and coffee going cold in a paper cup. The notice of blocking action. Callaway Capital Group's formal objection to the Mitchell Group secondary offering, accompanied by our counter-proposal for a structured exit that would return 11% more to the pension fund limited partners, went through at 8:53 a.m. By noon, Phoenix time, it had been picked up by Reuters. By 3, the Financial Times had it. By Friday evening, a journalist from Bloomberg had emailed Stephen requesting a comment. Stephen called me at 4:30. It's running exactly as we projected. Mitchell Group is scrambling. Their PR team has put out a statement, but the counterproposal numbers are too good for the LPs to ignore. I could hear papers on his desk. You've been getting press calls all day. Tell them we'll issue a statement next week. Nora, they're going to run this with or without your comment. The story they have is good enough. What story is that? That Callaway Capital, co-founded by a woman who started with nothing in Phoenix, Arizona, just blocked a $400 million secondary offering to protect pension fund returns. The Phoenix angle is already in 2 articles. A pause. Someone found your hometown. I closed my eyes. Is my name in it? Front and center. I thought about my mother, who read the local Phoenix news every morning with her coffee. I thought about Brooke, who had her alert set to the business section. I thought about my Uncle Grant, who checked his phone at dinner. "Stephen," I said, "let it run." My mother called Sunday morning. I was at the hotel. I answered on the second ring. "I read the article," she said. "The Bloomberg one? The Arizona Republic ran it too, with a photo." "I know. You're in a blazer in the photo." She said it like she was processing the image of a stranger. "It's a work photo. You look like your father." Her voice was quiet. "The way you're looking at the camera. He used to look at things like he could see the inside of them." He didn't say anything. "Ha ha, I showed Brooke," she said. "She called you last night," she said. "I know," I texted her back. "We're going to have lunch when I'm in New York." She seemed... My mother searched for the word. Settled. About it. A pause. She said you were right that it didn't change what she'd built. She said she needed to hear that. She did. "You're good at that," my mother said, knowing what people need to hear. Another pause. "I didn't know that about you. I should have known that about you." I watched the morning light come through the hotel window, white and clean over the desert. "Mom?" I said. "I'm coming home more often. I should have been coming home more often." "You have a firm to run." "I have a firm to run and a family I'd like to actually know." I let the sentence sit. Those things can coexist. I just didn't let them. She was quiet for a long moment. "Come in the spring," she said finally. "When the Palo Verde trees are blooming. It's the most beautiful time here. You've probably forgotten." I haven't forgotten. "Your father used to take photos every year. I still have them. I'd like to see them." I flew back to New York on Monday morning. LaGuardia in December is its own particular kind of chaos. Crowded gates, delayed announcements, the specific exhaustion of holiday travel carrying everyone through the terminal. I moved through it with my carry-on and my laptop bag and a coffee I'd bought at the Arizona Republic news rack inside Phoenix Sky Harbor. There was a photo of me in that paper, above the fold. I looked at it for a second. Then I put the paper in my bag and went to find my gate. Here is what I want you to understand about what happened in Phoenix that Christmas Eve. I did not walk into my mother's house to humiliate anyone. I did not arrive at that dinner table hoping to prove a point. What I wanted, what I had always wanted, was to be known by the people who were supposed to know me. Not celebrated, not awed, known. The mistake I made was believing that staying invisible was the same as being patient. That if I built long enough without claiming credit for it, eventually the sheer size of what I'd built would speak for itself, without me having to say a word. But invisibility isn't humility. It's just another way of disappearing. And you cannot be found if you never allow yourself to be seen. My father understood control, real control, the kind that comes from ownership and precision and showing up in the room prepared. What he didn't get the chance to understand was that being seen by the people you love is its own kind of power. Not leverage, just the simple, difficult thing of saying, "This is who I am. This is what I've built, and I need you to see it." I said it at a Christmas Eve dinner table in Phoenix, Arizona, in front of people who had spent years making me smaller than I was. And the world, my world, reorganized itself. Not perfectly, not without cost. My family will spend the next several years finding new ways to understand who I am and who they are to me. That is the work that comes after one honest night. It is slow. It is not dramatic. But it is real. Mitchell Group settled by the following Thursday. The pension fund LPs received the structured exit. Callaway Capital Group was in the Wall Street Journal by year's end with a profile that took 45 minutes and 3 separate requests to agree to. In it, I said one thing I want to repeat here. The most important investment I ever made wasn't in a fund. It was in being honest about what I was building and for whom I built it for my father. I named it for him. And I finally said so out loud. If you stayed until the end of this story, I want you to do something. Subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell, and leave me a comment below. Tell me about a time you built something in silence, something you kept hidden from the people who should have seen it first. I read every single comment, every single one. And if this story resonated with you, if you know what it feels like to be sitting at the table and waiting for the moment when they finally see you, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for being here. Until next time.